Hello and welcome to Identirati Office Hours. I'm your host, Mike Schwartz, founder of Glue. Today is episode 188. Before we get started, a quick reminder to follow IOH on LinkedIn or YouTube or even both. The topic today is Linux security, face issues before attackers. Our guest today is Peter Cummings, founder and CEO of LinuxGuard. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much for having me.
So before we dive into the topic at hand, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about your background and what was your career trajectory like?
Absolutely. So my background actually started out in hospitality. I worked as a chef. I'm a trained chef and waiter here in Denmark. But I've always kind of had a knack to fix problems that I've seen. So my road into information technology was really, we had a lot of people calling the restaurants trying to book tables. So I built a online table reservation service. Long story short, I dabbled more in web development, software development, came into IT security, landed in identity access management, and I've been there for the last 20 years. I find it kind of to be the perfect mix between development, business, security, and it keeps things interesting.
I can't resist making a quick cooking reference here. I love the show On the Line. It's a YouTube show about
Yes.
line chefs, not the head
Yeah.
chef, but it's a really great show. And I'm reminded at how much harder they work than I work. I have to say, people think I'm really busy, but I don't work as hard as a line chef. They get there at like dawn, they leave at night. It's incredible.
That is true. But having seen both sides, I would say that there are similarities. Sometimes I do miss being a chef.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the topic today is about Linux security, face issues before attackers, which Semperis has an interesting view on this. They talk about before the attack, during the attack, and after the attack. So the before the attack is definitely, to me, always seems like it has the highest ROI. Like, actually defending and doing the forensic analysis is really unproductive for the business.
Yes.
But before we sort of dive into the security part of it, let's just talk about the Linux part of it. Does Linux security still matter? Isn't everything running on containers and cloud workloads?
So I'm really happy that you asked that question. It forces me to think back. A couple of months ago, I'm pretty sure we've all seen it on LinkedIn and other places. There was this depiction of the stack of how everything was working. So you had a bit of Windows here, you had some containers here, you have, then you build a bit of AI on top, and that's kind of how we built this wobbly house of IT today. The funny thing about that picture is, and one thing that I see organizations keep forgetting is, under much of it is actually Linux. I believe the last numbers I read was that I think it was 68 or 78% of the world's enterprise workloads, they do depend on Linux. So yes, it very much matters. Yes, everything runs in containers. Most of those containers, they are in fact Linux. Many people, they think, well, we spin up a container, it's in an isolated environment, nothing bad can happen from that. Well, what happens if the service account you install with your Apache server that hosts a website inside that container, if that does something rogue, if there is something wrong in that code? Coincidentally, today we just discovered in a Node version that when we built a website with a particular Node version, it installed a crypto miner on inside the container. Had that not been a scaled down container, we that could have created issues. So containers, yes, it does provide some help, but it's still Linux. Linux that operates these massive hypervisors is still very much relevant. Yes.
I think people forget about the infrastructure. They just take it for granted, so they forget about Linux and the net. As I started an ISP, that's how I pivoted into tech from finance. And I always joke, people forget about the network. They forget about the routers and the switches and sort of the
Yeah,
layers that go layer 2 and 3, let's say. Um,
it's interesting to see in our strive for the new and next best thing, next better thing that's coming along. We kind of seem to forget our foundations. We kind of seem to forget that it doesn't really matter how big or fast an airplane we build. It still builds on the basic principles of aerodynamics. I keep laughing when many people get in line to have these XYZ is dead. The last one I saw is LDAP is dead. Okay, well, let's talk about Active Directory. The foundation is still there, and is still very much relevant. Yes.
yeah, Mike Weinert from Semperis said 90% of enterprises are still running Active Directory. So apparently
Yeah.
not too dead.
Exactly.
So I just want to quickly remind people we have episode notes for each episode. It's always glue.co/IOH and the episode number, so IOH-188. So you provided several blogs as homework or background. And I just wanted to bounce off one of my impressions from reading those blogs, which was about how identity security is not really actually working to control security in Linux. Like traditionally, we'd have a governance structure where we would review the roles of the humans. We'd say you have this role, you have this role, and based on that, you should be able to do this in Linux. But what I read, in reading your blogs, is that you have some questions about whether that actually works at the Linux practical, everyday level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let me get into that, and what I mean by that. We have loads of identity technology solutions out there, and I've had the good fortune to work with many of them. And for, I would say, most of what you would consider as business applications, it works really well. There are out-of-the-box connectors to them. Active Directory, for example, that we just mentioned, you would have applications where you would have one account, you will have one or more entitlements. You can build that into a role that kind of gives you the picture of what you can do. But when we start scratching the surface a little bit, things become a bit more complicated. For identity people on the call or watching this, we'll all know what kind of trouble we start getting into when we look at AD with nested security groups, for example. That is something that can explode a lot of things. Linux is a bit of a different beast. I'm sure it's not because of negligence in organizations, but it's kind of been one of these areas. It hasn't had a lot of business focus, and therefore maybe the complexities, they haven't been seen. With Linux, we also have accounts. We've also got groups. But inherently, the way that Linux is built up, when you look into, for example, an IGA tool, is one server is one application. Now, the quick people watching this will say, well, hang on a second, we can just use a directory, and then, we can manage all of our accounts across all of our servers. That's fantastic. Now we have authentication solved. You can then tie that to groups, and groups can mean a lot of things in a Linux context. A group can be giving access to file or folders, but it could also be tied to a sudo policy. And with the sudo system, we start getting into a whole different area of privilege escalation. We can tie that down to a single command. You can execute this as this user, but the default one that many will still have is you can do everything as all users, and if you really want to spice it up, you can do it with no password.
Can I just hit pause there for a second?
Yeah.
For those of us Linux geeks out there, I was just starting to crack up because well, you could do sudo su minus Peter, and now I could be Peter. So sudo is not only like a way to say, okay, I am now root. It's actually a way to impersonate anyone on the system.
That is true.
It creates all types of like, you know, impersonation without any audit or without, or there would be an audit trail, but let me let you continue. So we were talking about basically how identity doesn't map that well, maybe, or
Well,
doesn't guarantee 100% success really
it
in
doesn't.
managing your Linux.
Correct. It doesn't guarantee 100% success. I mean, granted, most people working in this industry are professionals, and we found some way of doing something. And the standard one that I run into or hear when speaking to organizations is we've got it covered. We have a directory that we use for authentication. We may or may not even have our Linux group tied to directory groups. That's fantastic. Plus, we've got our PAM flavor of the day, CyberArk, Delinea, whatever is out there, and we're using that, and that is awesome. That is great. That's a really, really good start to getting there. Unfortunately, I've also seen the same organizations saying, well, that's fantastic. Can I have access to your Linux environment? And I get access to the Linux environment using the standard tools through the directory, multi-factor authentication, using CyberArk, session instantiation, recording, all of this stuff. And I go in and I execute sudo su minus root, and then I'm root. Because the sudo policies, they haven't been evaluated, and there is no password in order to execute the sudo policies. So you talked about before having a car where it was only the engine, but you don't have all of the interior. Here, you have your front door, which is a 2-foot security door with bolts and locks and everything on it to secure all your valuables in the house, but you left your windows open.
Yeah, yeah. So you're saying once you get in, then once you have sudo access, you're basically like can do anything.
Well, yes, because I mean, we need to remember in this day and age that many incidents, they happen not because of attackers or hackers that are out to do us ill will. I mean, from one of my first experiences with Linux, and this was really fantastic. It was at a customer presentation with a live running production system, and I needed to delete something on the server, and I did a recursive delete from the root as root. So that was wonderful to see a production system just breaking down in front of me, and I had too much privilege. Obviously, I learned the lesson. That's one of the ones that you only do once. But the threats can also be from our engineers that are on our servers that try to do something or make a mistake, and they got too much privilege in doing it, and then stuff happens. So I believe we can't only look at who can or cannot get into our systems. We need to look at what's happening inside the system, and that holds even more true in this day of AI agents roaming all over.
I had a team member who actually accidentally removed the /lib folder from a server and really crashed the server.
Yes.
I remember that day. Yeah. Well, one if identity is not the answer, let's say, and I think identity is useful, but somehow you mentioned the pseudo drift issue, but I think there's other more fundamental issues about how maybe managing the users isn't the right approach, but managing the stuff that they can do would be a better approach. So if identity based isn't the answer, what other ways might we have to figure out how to secure this?
I think it's a question of knowing what your systems, how they are configured, and what users are able to do, and how and why they're able to do that. I always say, we at Linux Guard, we are in the business of finding your issues before your attackers they do. Because as you mentioned to begin with Semperis, there is the before attack, the during attack, and the after attack. A forensic analysis, there isn't really a lot of much point in investing a lot into that. You should have bought the insurance up ahead that prevented, or at least alleviated some of the effects of the incident. And I believe that there's a lot that you can do as an organization. So the way that we look at it is, we examine all of the telemetry that we can find that is not only the identity, but everything around the identity as well. So it is, if you have someone that want to do a nefarious authentication onto a Linux server, it's easy. It's one line in the SSHD config that would allow password-based logon as root. Who's going to catch that? Nobody's going to catch that if we're not looking into that configuration. You have, and I've seen this for myself in I'm afraid to say, large global organizations where we have engineers that are copying keys, private keys, from user to user, simply because it just makes our life a little bit easier in doing this thing that we need to do. Nobody's catching that. Nobody is really investing a lot into rotating SSH keys because, hey, we've got keys. We're secure. And I've seen organizations that say, or they go to their service provider that delivers their Linux equipment, and that they will say, yeah, well, we're all good because we've got SE Linux enabled. That's fantastic. What about having it enforcing? Because SE Linux enabled, it does nothing other than fill up logs. And it's these kind of issues where we see organizations not finding out before after the fact, where it is actually extremely easy to find out in front and just close those holes. If somebody is trying to copy out the data directory of your Postgres server, you want to know, and you probably want to have a conversation with that employee about why that's happening.
So it seems like what you're saying is that we have this list of stuff that we know shouldn't be. And in cloud native, there's been sort of a move towards declarative infrastructure. So we're just going to say what the infrastructure should look like. We don't care. Then different platforms like Google or Azure or Amazon might implement that a little differently. But we're able to sort of just have moved to declarative infrastructure. And it seems like what you're saying is that, and similarly in security, maybe a declarative approach might be preferred, where you say, okay, I want to make sure that none of the private keys are the same size. I want to make sure that this command is not enabled, that SE Linux is enforcing, not just you have all these things that you're asserting to be true. And maybe you don't care about the exact details. They could vary a little bit from system to system, but you want sort of assurance that I have a list of like these core things about Linux that should be true. And if they're not true in your organization, you should know about them like right now.
Mm-hmm.
That sound fair?
Yeah, absolutely. That's 100% fair. And I know that there are organizations out there doing that. I've been there. I've implemented it for them. But what I find is that Linux often becomes kind of the, shall we say, forgotten child. It's sort of like a lot of my identity peers out there will recognize the issues that we've had with integrating an SAP environment, for example, in an IIT tool. It's the same thing, because it's its own world. it can be done in so many different ways in each organization with the permissions and the policies and the rules and the roles and everything, that it is very difficult to get a meaningful integration into an SAP environment. I'm not saying it can't be done, but it takes a lot of effort, and it takes an organization that is willing to invest into having that effort done.
Yeah. I'm just going to come out and say it, and this is say enterprises have abdicated that because they assume the system administrators are taking care of it. They've just abdicated the Linux because they don't have a good way to interact and to manage it. So they've just basically written off the risk and said, okay, well, and this is where I think, diligent organizations can say, okay, we have all this legacy stuff. That includes Active Directory. It includes Linux, which is still running 70% of our workloads. It also, we can't forget about the new stuff, but we have to make sure that we're actually governing the existing stuff and not just abdicating and say, oh, I'm sure it's okay, even though people are sharing our, even though pseudo access or pseudo drift is rampant in our organization.
It's interesting and perhaps a little bit humorous when we see organizations the world over spend millions in various PAM tools, break glass scenarios, safes with parts of passwords for the domain administrator account for your Active Directory, because if Active Directory breaks down, our company shuts off. Yet Active Directory is running on a VMware ESX, which is essentially Linux, and nobody has control of that.
Right. I want to pivot a little bit towards observability, because part of good governance is visibility. If you can't see what's happening, you can't govern it. And
Correct.
there's been a real lack of visibility in the tools in the Linux infrastructure layer. So how do you think Linux Guard would help improve visibility to the people who want to be governing it?
So there are obviously a lot of tools out there today that do a lot of log passing, a lot of log analysis, infrastructure, performance, resource monitoring. We do have the identity tools out there that are able to do something, but if we start really getting into like the nitty gritty of deep protection of Linux systems, there are a few vendors out there that do something. The problem with those vendors, the way that I see it, is that they install clunky heavy agents on the endpoints that eat up a lot of resources on the server, and two, many of them are compiled down to the single kernel version, which effectively puts an organization into a technological login or vendor login, however you want to phrase that. The way that we do with Linux Guard is we use 100% native tools that are there. We use eBPF filters to interact with the kernel to get the messages that we need there, and various other techniques to extract the data that we need from the server in various different forms. We do it close to real time, so that if you, for example, have a file extraction of a server, you will get notified in our tool. We're not saying that everybody has got a host of issues, but what we do say is, you need to check this, because if you have issues, attackers, they will come and find them. So the way that we normally interact with organizations is we come in, we do a 30-day audit or proof of concept, call it what you will. I won't really call it a proof of concept. It's more of an audit, because we actually do deliver something other than you can use our platform to the client at the end of these 30 days, showing them, this is where your issues are in your organization. Hopefully you have none. But this is where the issues that we found they are, and these are the modules from us that you could use. Or it could be, as I've seen with other organizations, we have identified that, for example, SSH key rotation or key management. It's an issue. We want 30-day rotation on our SSH keys. We want it to be an automated process. Fine, we have a module that will help you with that. We want to map, exactly who can become root in our organizations. So we extract all of the information with that, and we build up the graph, so to speak. But we also make that information available so that your IAG tools, your IVIPs, or any other technology partner will be able to ingest that data and enhancing the visibility of their platforms to their clients, bringing the relevant Linux context needed to their clients.
You used an acronym IVIP, which stands for Identity, Visibility, and Intelligence Platform.
Yes.
Which sounds a lot to me like ITDR, Identity Threat Detection and Response. Are those the same thing, or what's the delta?
That's a very good question that has been asked by many and discussed by even more. I would say it is not the same, and then it is a little bit. First of all, I wouldn't the P in IVIP, it being a platform on its own. I don't subscribe to that notion, but I believe that ITDR is not really around the intelligence of what do we have, how do our systems look today, what is out there, what do we need to know. It is more something happened, and now we need to respond to it. So we are during the attack.
I hit pause there for a second.
Yeah.
In the ITDR systems, the primary key is the user. So when you add a record to the ITDR database, it's always a user something, right?
Yes.
And so it really is identity centric. The ITDR platform like Veracent, which was bought by Imprivata recently, they use the IDP logs as the primary input for what's happening with a user. But information about a user, as long as you have that primary key of the user identifier, any system could send information about it. So I guess, I just wanted to hit pause there because if this platform is called, and this is the first time I heard this acronym, Identity, Visibility, and Intelligence Platform, it seems like fundamentally you're still using identity or the human as the primary key for the reports.
We at LinuxGuard are using the identity as in an account on a Linux server. It can be a human or it can be a non-human identity. We don't as such differentiate between that. For us, it's identities. We will obviously flag, if this is what we assume to be a human identity because it's been created after the fact, or it's something that comes as part of a package installation, or it's one of the system defaults that comes with the system when you install it. But I mean, yes, we do rotate around identity as well, and I think just to circle back to that ITDR thing, it is with the IVIP terminology, it is finding out the potential of what is there, not about detecting when something is happening with an identity. So, for example, in all systems in the world that are in this space, it'll probably show up saying, that Mike, he rebooted the account as root. The IVIP part about is finding out that Mike, he's actually able to reboot the server as root before that actually happens. So I think that's a delta, if that makes sense.
We'll leave that I want to pivot towards compliance because compliance sometimes justifies the whole budget is driven by compliance. And
Yes.
so in your blogs, you seemed a little bit skeptical that, companies are passing compliance like SOC 2, for example, um, and then they're using tools to manage Linux. What are the compliance reports missing, or why aren't the compliance reports doing a job, are adequately addressing something as basic as Linux? Because Linux has been around forever. It's not like some new technology. Why doesn't SOC 2, or what's the gaps with the SOC 2 report?
If you look into all of the compliance or most of the compliance framework, there will be areas in those compliance controls that do address Linux to some point. The issue that we are flagging is one. It is extremely difficult to find that information out of your Linux systems today. It's a quite resource intensive and therefore costly affair. Most of these compliance audits are based on spreadsheets that we pull out from the server that we need to have analysts to sit and look through. And it is not in a real time manner. And I think one of the big issues with that is these compliant reports or compliance audits are often seen as something negative, as a hindrance, as something, it's like taking an exam. Nobody loves doing it, but we have to. And I think that's a little bit wrong to look at it in that way, because if we flip the script a little bit, the compliance regulations are there for a reason, and for most organizations, especially my background has been primarily in the financial sector. It's a license to operate. That is what will make or break your business. So why wouldn't you want to have that in a real time manner? Why wouldn't you want to be proactive in terms of your compliance remediation rather than being reactive after the auditors they have come in with a lot of audit deficiencies? Indeed, that's what I'm seeing when I get called in many times, or have been in the past. Is we've got this long list of audit deficiencies. We need to get them fixed by such and such date. That is kind of the driver. The way that we're looking at it is, we've got the data anyway, so let's just look at the data to see, are we actually passing these compliance controls, and have that audit ready, so that when the auditors they come up, now it's a question of going into the system, pulling off a finished audit report and saying, this is a status as of 5 minutes ago in our entire Linux estate. So that's one of the functionalities that we bring as well.
There has been a movement towards operationalizing compliance. There are tools at the CNCF. There's a tool called Trestle, which is part of the Compass project. I think it came out of the Red Hat team and looking to automate a lot of the U.S. government compliance, FIPS compliance, I guess, stuff like that. So I think the industry is actually pretty aligned with you on this idea that compliance needs to be a more continuous or operational endeavor. What kind of tooling do you use to actually make it to operationalize compliance?
So we go out and we analyze the various compliance frameworks out there, and then we make an interpretation of that, of how that should be in a Linux environment. So for example, I can't off the top of my head remember which one it is, but in PCI DSS there is one control that says that essentially a Linux server should be behind a firewall. So we are able to, with the data, it's a pretty sane control, but we're able to with the data that we're able to see, okay, is there a firewall running on the server? No, there's not. Then we can test it from various points in the infrastructure and say, okay, is there actually a firewall in place here, and get a yes/no answer. The same thing with multi-factor authentication should be enabled. Root should not be able to log in via SSH, and so on and so on and so on. So we analyze the control requirements. We create scripts from them, and we're able to execute these scripts on the servers to see if we actually pass compliance, and we do that on a regular interval.
So it wouldn't be a live stream in 2026 if I didn't ask you about AI. Where do you see AI agents starting to become more active, and what are some of the challenges that you think AI agents might add to how they might make this even more complicated?
So, I mean, yeah, we 2026. The rabbit is kind of out of the hat with AI. Everybody is using it in various ways. So are we. I think the problem with AI, not really the problem, but one of the big challenges with AI is we used to have this kind of notion that if you are fiddling around in software development, if you're fiddling around in infrastructure, if you're fiddling around in services, you have some form of education, some form of training, some form of background to be able to do that. You have during your career been watched, mentored by peers. So there is some form of we have an idea of this is how we do things, this is how we do security, yet things still happen. With AI, we have now opened the door completely. Everybody is able to go out and create a computer system, and I believe that many will. And this is a great thing, because there's a lot of ideas out there that otherwise probably wouldn't have seen the light of day. But it is also an issue that we might have people that don't necessarily have the security notion that will go out and start developing applications, not having this security mindset. And with the combination of potential unsafe software coming onto servers that also have unsafe configurations, where an AI agent can operate as a user, impersonate another user that might have root credentials. I mean, we've already seen examples of how catastrophic that can be. That's the one thing. The other thing is that we want to have guardrails in place. I don't think that anybody disagrees with me on that when using AI today. We want to be able to monitor and check what does AI do. So, all software developers out there, they should have Claude Code. Well, they shouldn't have Claude Code. They can have whatever tool they want, is what I'm trying to say. But when it does something, you want to review what has the AI actually done. The same thing, I can see a future where we have AI doing systems administration. We want to make sure that the configurations that are being put in place and the decisions that are being made, that we monitor that they are correct, and we're able to react to them. So that's sort of how I see things with AI.
Another current events question: Mythos, the Anthropic hacking tool, is a lot in the news lately.
Yep.
And I wonder if a company like you doesn't say, "Hey, I'm going to throw Mythos at my Linux system and see what it says," or also, if you were to have access to a tool like that, how it could potentially, expand the number of assertions that you make about how secure a company's Linux environment is.
So I think that delving into territories where you're not really 100% familiar as a business is always a slightly bad idea. So I'd like to keep it within the realm of what I understand and control, rather than using a tool like Mythos, for example, to open up other vectors. I think one thing that is important to remember with all of these AI tools is somebody built them for a purpose, and yes, they can be very generalist, and we can use them for a lot of things. I'm not going to say never, because I did say never 18 months ago, and I've many times regretted that. But I don't think that we'll ever see fully autonomous AI systems like I understand what Mythos is or can do to find vulnerabilities and potentially close them in our systems. I have a difficulty seeing that. For Linux Guard, I will say the work that we do, while we do use AI to some extent, I think everybody does today, it will always be rooted in the craft that we've known, that we've done for the last 2 decades. We are not going to be relying on AI to do the manual heavy lifting of what needs to be done.
So last question. How much of this is more cultural versus just code, do you think? And actually, for an enterprise that says, okay, I want to get serious about Linux security, but at the end of the day, how much of that change has to be cultural versus just technology?
I'll be blunt, and I say I think 80% of it is cultural. I think, unfortunately, the security function in many organizations has become like a sidearm of the finance version. What gives me most bang for my bucks? And if I have a PowerPoint that is telling me everything is great, then everything is great. I think there is a lack of curiosity of what actually lies under the hood. There is a lack of questioning the results that we see, and I think that there is a kind of a stressing element into getting the next new thing, or getting my annual bonus. So I think that it is very much a cultural thing. Yes.
Annual bonus does sound good, though.
It does. Yes, I like them too.
Okay, so this is great. Before we break, any last thoughts, events that you'll be at, or things people should look at next?
Well, personally, I wish I would be at EIC in a couple of weeks. I won't. But let me leave you with this. If you can't clearly answer who can become root on your Linux servers, if you don't know where the holes in the cheese, so to speak, they are, that's not a theoretical problem that you have. That's an incident just waiting to happen, and it will at some point. So look into your Linux environments, find out where your issues are, put up the guardrails, and fix those gaps before you're forced to. That's what I would say.
Peter, that was awesome. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
All right, before we go, another reminder, please follow Identity Office Hours on LinkedIn or YouTube, or both even. IOH is sponsored by glue.org. Next week is IAW 42. So join us in Mountain View, California to finally find out the answer to life, the universe, and everything. We're back on May 5th with Agentic Authorization with Cedar. Sarah Cacchetti and Claudry Hepburn will be joining us for that episode.